12 autonomous surface vehicles, roughly jet ski-sized, matte black, riding so low in the water that radar returns blend with wave clutter. Each one carrying a shaped charge capable of breaching the hull of a patrol Corvette. Each one guided by satellite uplink and onboard cameras, with an operator sitting somewhere along the Ukrainian coast, watching a thermal feed scroll across a screen. Russia's southern patrol lane existed for one reason: keep Ukrainian sea drones away from the missile launchers. It failed. What followed wasn't just a successful strike against a single vessel. It was the systematic collapse of an entire defensive concept. Moscow had spent months building a layered coastal screen. Radar nets, fast patrol craft, helicopter overwatch, convinced that the shallow, radar-dense waters of the southern approaches made swarm attacks impossible this far east. Russian naval planners had studied the earlier Black Sea strikes and concluded that geography would protect them here. They were wrong, and the consequences would run through Russian naval doctrine for years. I'm your host at Conflict East, where we analyze the battles that change wars. Today we're breaking down one of the most technically sophisticated naval drone operations of the entire conflict. A strike that didn't just destroy a vessel, but collapsed the logic of an entire defensive architecture. What happens over the next 27 minutes reveals exactly how Ukraine turned a $0 navy into one of the most feared maritime forces on the planet. To understand why this strike mattered, you need to understand what Russia was protecting. The Russian Black Sea Fleet's surface combatant arm had been gutted by Ukrainian naval drone operations stretching back years. The flagship Moskva was gone. Multiple large landing ships had been sent to the bottom. The fleet retreated progressively eastward, pulling major assets away from Sevastopol and redistributing them to ports further along the coast, closer to Novorossiysk and into shallow littoral zones that naval planners believed offered natural protection. But Russia still needed to keep Kalibr cruise missiles in the fight. Kalibr-capable platforms. The small missile corvettes and submarines launching salvos at Ukrainian cities were one of Moscow's few remaining ways to generate strategic firepower from the Black Sea. Lose those platforms and Russia's ability to conduct standoff maritime strikes dropped dramatically. So the Kremlin built a protective screen around them. The Escort doctrine was straightforward on paper. Fast patrol craft. Raptor-class interceptors and Cerna-class landing boats converted for patrol duty would operate in a moving perimeter around the missile-capable vessels. Helicopter overwatch would extend radar coverage further out when available. Shore-based radar stations would track surface contacts and vector patrol boats toward anything anomalous. The theory was that speed, radar coverage, and shallow water geography combined would make a swarm attack geometrically impossible. Drones would have to navigate through too many overlapping sensor fields, and even if a few broke through, patrol boats could intercept and destroy them before they reached the launch vessels. The theory was elegant. The execution had a critical flaw. Ukrainian intelligence had been studying the patrol patterns for months. Satellite imagery, drone reconnaissance overflights, and signals intelligence built a comprehensive picture of exactly how the southern escort screen operated. The interval between patrol boat passes, the blind spots in radar coverage created by coastal terrain, the timing windows when helicopter overwatch was unavailable due to maintenance or weather, the exact speed profiles patrol vessels ran between, anchor points and patrol waypoints. And one more thing, the mission signature of the specific missile boat they were targeting. The vessel was a Buyan-M class Corvette, small, fast, carrying 8 Kalibr cruise missile cells. It displaced just under 950 tons and measured 75 meters long. Its radar cross-section was small enough that in cluttered coastal waters it was genuinely difficult to distinguish from commercial fishing traffic on older radar systems. Russia had been using this Corvette class precisely because reduced size made them harder to target. They could operate closer to shore, nestled inside the protective geometry of the coastline, and launch salvos at extended range before repositioning. Ukrainian planners had been watching this particular vessel for weeks. They knew its patrol pattern, its anchor schedule, and the 2-hour window in the late evening when helicopter overwatch rotated back to base for refueling and the patrol boat screen thinned to minimum coverage. That window was the target. Which weapon was deadlier in this operation? The sea drone-shaped charges? The GPS guidance system that threaded them through the patrol screen? Or the intelligence architecture that built the targeting picture over weeks of observation? Comment below with your answer. A for the warheads, B for the navigation system, C for the intelligence. The real answer might surprise you. Preparation began weeks before the strike. Ukrainian naval intelligence teams, working with the Security Service's Maritime Directorate, established what they internally called the pattern of life assessment for the southern patrol lane. Every surface contact appearing in satellite passes was logged and cross-referenced. Commercial AIS transponder data, which Russian military vessels didn't broadcast, but civilian traffic did. helped establish the background picture of normal maritime activity in the zone. Anything appearing consistently without AIS, running at naval patrol speeds, was flagged as military. The Buyan-M Corvette showed up in 11 separate satellite passes over a 3-week window. Its patrol sector covered roughly 12 kilometers of coastline. It moved between two positions: a forward anchor point roughly 4 kilometers offshore and a patrol line 3 kilometers further out, on a schedule predictable enough to model with high confidence. The escort boats were mapped too. 2 Raptor-class interceptors typically worked in a loose formation roughly 800 meters ahead of the Corvette on its patrol line, with a third Raptor running a separate perimeter loop approximately 2 kilometers to the south. When the Corvette sat at anchor, one Raptor maintained close proximity while the others conducted wider sweeps. That was the geometry Ukrainian drone operators had to thread. The mission planning team ran the problem repeatedly. 12 autonomous surface vehicles, each traveling at roughly 40 knots, each with a combat radius sufficient to reach the target zone from the launch point. The approach geometry had to account for Raptor patrol positions, shore-based radar arcs, and the Corvette's likely position within its anchor point window. The solution was a split-axis approach. 9 drones from one bearing to create the primary threat vector the patrol boats would respond to, while 3 drones came from a second bearing, lagging the main group by approximately 4 minutes. The logic was brutal in its simplicity. When the Raptors responded to the main group, they'd turn toward the primary threat. That turn would open a gap in their coverage on the secondary bearing. The 3 trailing drones would thread that gap. Then a complication appeared that nearly derailed the entire operation. 48 hours before the planned launch window, satellite imagery revealed a 4th Raptor-class boat operating in the patrol zone, one that hadn't appeared in any of the previous 11 observation passes. A vessel that hadn't been there when the mission geometry was calculated. A vessel positioned almost exactly in the gap the trailing 3 drones were supposed to exploit. The mission planning team had less than 12 hours to revise the approach geometry. Stay with me. What the team decided to do in response to that unexpected 4th patrol boat changed the entire tactical picture. And it's exactly the kind of adaptation that separates Ukrainian naval drone operations from anything else in the world right now. The revised plan introduced a second split, 3 phases instead of 2. The main group of 9 drones was divided into a leading element of 5 and a trailing element of 4, separated by a 7-minute interval. The 3 drones on the secondary axis were repositioned to a slightly wider bearing angle. The goal was to force the 4 Raptor boats into sequential response decisions rather than a single coordinated reaction. When the first 5 drones appeared on radar, the Raptors would respond. When the next 4 appeared from slightly behind the first wave, the Raptors would already be committed to their intercept course. By the time the 3 drones on the secondary axis reached the gap, the Raptor screen would be stretched across 3 different threat vectors simultaneously. A chess problem solved in real time under operational pressure by a team that had never attended a formal naval war college. Ukrainian satellite intelligence confirmed the 4th Raptor's position one final time 6 hours before launch. The revised approach geometry was uploaded to the drone guidance systems. Operators ran final checks on the control consoles. Thermal camera feeds were verified. Navigation waypoints confirmed. The launch window opened at 11:47 p.m. How many patrol vessels did the Ukrainian drone swarm force into simultaneous response during this operation? Was it A2 Raptors, B3 Raptors, or C all 4 Raptors simultaneously? The answer comes later. It matters more than you think. The first 5 drones entered the patrol zone at 12:14 a.m. They were running at 38 knots, low in the water, radar cross-sections minimized by hull geometry refined through months of operational iteration. Shore-based radar detected them approximately 3 kilometers inside the outer perimeter, later than Russian planners had expected, which compressed the reaction timeline immediately. The 2 forward Raptors turned toward the incoming contacts, accelerated to full speed, their crews radioing contact reports back to the Corvette and to the shore-based command post. The radio traffic Ukrainian signals intelligence was monitoring showed immediate escalation in the Russian command net. The shore station ordering helicopter overwatch to launch, a helicopter currently on the ground with both engines shut down, needing 16 minutes to get airborne. They didn't have 16 minutes. The second wave of 4 drones appeared on radar at 12:21 a.m., 7 minutes behind the first group, on a bearing that forced the 2 forward Raptors to split their response. 1 Raptor continued toward the first 5 contacts. The second turned to engage the new wave. This left the gap on the southern bearing thinner by exactly the amount Ukrainian planners had calculated. The Corvette's crew was fully alert now. The vessel was at anchor, which meant it couldn't maneuver rapidly. The crew was attempting to weigh anchor and get underway, a process that takes several minutes even under emergency conditions. Russian combat footage, captured by a drone camera feed broadcasting the entire engagement back to the Ukrainian control room, showed crew members on deck moving with evident urgency. Defensive machine guns were manned. Flares were fired. Subscribe to Conflict East if you want to understand how modern warfare actually works. Because what happened in the next 4 minutes is a case study that will be taught in naval academies for decades. The third Raptor, running the southern perimeter loop, had been vectored toward the second drone wave. As it turned north, it created a gap approximately 600 meters wide on its original patrol line. That gap would exist for an estimated 3 to 4 minutes before the patrol loop would bring the boat back into coverage. The 3 drones on the secondary axis entered that gap at 12:23 a.m. By 12:24 a.m., the forward Raptor engaging the first wave had destroyed 2 drones using its heavy machine guns. The second Raptor was engaging the secondary wave, destroying 1 more. But the arithmetic was working against the Russian patrol crews. 5 contacts in the first wave, 4 in the second. 9 simultaneous targets split between 2 fast patrol boats whose engagement rate with primary weapons was roughly 1 target per 90 seconds under optimal conditions. They were outnumbered by a ratio that exceeded their ability to service targets fast enough. The first of the 3 penetrating drones reached the Corvette at 12:26 a.m. The shaped charge detonated against the Corvette's hull below the waterline on the port side, approximately 8 meters aft of the bow. The explosion opened a breach roughly 2 meters in diameter. Water inflow was immediate and catastrophic. The Corvette began taking on water faster than damage control teams could respond. A second drone struck moments later, approximately 12 meters further aft on the same side, penetrating into the engine compartment. The third drone struck the stern. The Corvette listed heavily to port within 4 minutes of the first impact. The crew was abandoning ship within 6 minutes. The vessel sank in the patrol zone it had been assigned to protect, approximately 2 kilometers from the nearest point of the coastline it was supposed to defend. The entire engagement, from first radar contact to the moment the Corvette's hull disappeared beneath the surface, lasted 31 minutes. What happened next? In the Russian command response, in the immediate redistribution of the surviving patrol fleet, in the panic visible in intercepted communications from the regional naval headquarters, is where this story becomes something larger than a single successful strike. If you believe that tactics win wars, type Conflict East in the comments. Because the tactical success here was almost secondary to the strategic cascade it triggered. Russian Naval Command in the region received the initial contact report at 12:14 a.m. They received the sinking report at 12:57 a.m. In the 43 minutes between those 2 transmissions, the following decisions were made, reversed, and made again. Helicopter overwatch at 2 additional patrol sectors was ordered to launch immediately, then ordered to stand down when it became clear the attack was localized, then ordered to launch again when the magnitude of the penetration became clear. 2 additional Raptor boats from a secondary patrol sector were ordered to reinforce the strike zone, then redirected when signals intelligence suggested a second drone wave might be inbound from a different bearing. Shore-based radar operators were ordered to lower their detection thresholds, a change that immediately generated dozens of false contacts from wave clutter, overwhelming the command net with noise at exactly the moment clarity was needed. Ukrainian signals intelligence was monitoring all of this. The transcript of the regional naval command net during those 43 minutes is, by any measure, a document of institutional dysfunction under pressure. Officers contradicting each other. Orders issued and countermanded within minutes. One senior officer demanding a status report on the helicopter overwatch and receiving 3 different answers in 60 seconds from 3 different subordinates. The intercepted communications revealed something even more significant about systemic problems in Russian Naval Command. They had no pre-planned response protocol for a multi-axis drone swarm attack on a patrol-protected vessel. The Escort doctrine had been built around the assumption that patrol boats would stop the drones before they reached the protected vessel. There was no contingency for what to do when the patrol boats failed. The Corvette crew, operating without doctrine for this scenario, had improvised, armed their defensive systems, fired flares, attempted to get underway. But without a rehearsed response, the improvisation wasn't fast enough. This was the critical intelligence takeaway. Russia's Southern Escort doctrine had a single point of failure. If the patrol boats couldn't stop all the drones, the protected vessel had no independent survivability. The escort screen and the missile platform were a system that only worked if every component functioned as designed. Ukraine had found the gap, threaded it, and exposed the entire construct as brittle. Consequences unfolded rapidly. Within hours of the sinking, Regional Naval Command issued emergency repositioning orders for the remaining Kalibr-capable vessels in the southern patrol sector. Satellite imagery captured in the following days confirmed that 2 additional Buyan-M class corvettes had moved from established patrol positions to secondary anchorages assessed as further from the known drone launch envelope. The patrol boat screen was reinforced with additional Raptor-class vessels pulled from other sectors, thinning coverage elsewhere along the coastal zone. The redistribution came at a cost. The corvettes moved to secondary anchorages further from optimal Kalibr firing positions against their assigned targets. Russian naval planners faced an uncomfortable choice. Keep the missile vessels in positions that maximize strike utility and accept the vulnerability Ukraine had just demonstrated, or pull them back to safer positions that degraded operational effectiveness. Every nautical mile of retreat was a tactical concession. What would NATO have done differently in defending those patrol lanes? Comment your tactical analysis. Specifically, what additional sensor layer or response protocol could have closed the gap Ukraine exploited? The answer isn't obvious, and the debate in Western naval circles since this strike has been genuinely unresolved. There's a broader dimension to this operation that deserves serious analysis, and it connects to something Ukrainian naval planners had been working toward for months before the strike itself. The obstacle that nearly derailed the entire mission. The appearance of that 4th Raptor boat 48 hours before the planned launch window had actually been encountered in a different form during an earlier drone operation that was aborted before it reached the engagement phase. In that earlier case, an unexpected patrol vessel appeared in the approach corridor and the mission was scrubbed. The Ukrainian planning team used that aborted operation to develop the multi-phase approach geometry that became standard doctrine for complex escort screen penetration. The failure fed directly into the success. This is the innovation loop that defines Ukrainian military development in this conflict. Every obstacle becomes a design input. Every aborted mission generates tactical learning. The teams that plan these operations don't treat failure as an endpoint. They treat it as data. The 4th Raptor boat, which could have caused this mission to be scrubbed for a second time, instead became a validation test for the revised approach geometry. The drone operators running the 12 vehicles during the strike were working from a control interface refined through dozens of previous missions. The camera feeds, the navigation displays, the engagement sequencing controls. Every element reflected lessons from previous operations. When the operators saw the Raptor response patterns developing in real time, they had contingency adjustments preloaded. The 3 drones on the secondary axis could be accelerated or decelerated by operator command to adjust their timing relative to the gap created by the Raptor's repositioning. This wasn't improvisation under fire. It was rehearsed flexibility. The ability to execute a planned contingency smoothly because the contingency had been gamed out in advance. Ukraine doesn't just use weapons. Ukraine invents new ways to fight. The Southern Patrol Strike was the clearest expression of that in the naval domain. The damage assessment conducted in the days following the operation went beyond the immediate loss of the Corvette. Ukrainian military analysts examined what the strike had accomplished at 4 different levels. At the tactical level, 1 Kalibr-capable Corvette destroyed, 8 cruise missile launch cells permanently removed from the Russian Black Sea inventory, the crew of approximately 52 personnel, based on Ukrainian intelligence assessments and subsequent Russian military communication intercepts, either lost with the vessel or rescued and removed from operational status. The 3 drones that penetrated the escort screen carried a combined warhead payload of roughly 240 kilograms of high explosive, delivering it against a vessel worth approximately $120 million. At the operational level, the repositioning of 2 additional corvettes to secondary anchorages with associated degradation in Kalibr strike utility, the diversion of additional Raptor-class patrol boats from other coastal sectors, the grounding of helicopter overwatch for 72 hours while Russian Naval Command conducted a force protection review of patrol protocols. During those 72 hours, the southern coastal zone operated with reduced air reconnaissance, a vulnerability Ukrainian planners noted for future operations. At the strategic level, the strike contributed to a continuing pattern of Russian naval withdrawal and positional compression in the Black Sea. Each successful Ukrainian naval drone operation had forced Russian naval assets further from positions that maximize strike utility. The cumulative effect was a Russian Black Sea fleet that existed but couldn't project power effectively in the western and central portions of the sea. At the doctrinal level, the operation demonstrated conclusively that a sufficiently sophisticated multi-axis drone swarm could penetrate an escort screen specifically designed to stop single-axis or dual-axis attacks. This finding propagated through intelligence assessments shared with NATO naval commands and generated significant doctrinal review discussions about the vulnerability of similar escort protection schemes used or planned by other navies in contested waters. The echoes of a Black Sea operation were being felt in planning documents in Washington, London, Paris, and Tokyo. Real tactics, real consequences. Conflict East. Now consider the Russian perspective, not to sympathize with it, but to understand how a competent adversary rationalizes a catastrophic failure, because that rationalization shapes what they do next. Russian naval analysts, working from the same basic facts Ukrainian planners were analyzing, would have identified several specific failure points in the Escort doctrine the strike exposed. The single-layer detection architecture. Shore radar plus patrol boat radar, with helicopter overwatch as the primary extended coverage sensor, had proven insufficient against low observable surface targets in sea states above a certain threshold. The patrol boat's engagement rate against small, fast-moving surface targets was lower than the doctrine had assumed. The communication protocols for multi-axis threat response had not been adequately developed or rehearsed. Each failure point represented a correctable problem. Russia could invest in additional radar assets with lower detection thresholds for small surface targets, develop and rehearse multi-axis response protocols, upgrade defensive armament on patrol vessels to improve engagement rates, or pull protected vessels back far enough that drone attack radius became a limiting factor. But each correction came at a cost. Better radar requires time and resources to deploy. Multi-axis response protocols require rehearsal time and fuel. Upgraded defensive armament means procurement timelines. Pulling vessels back further means reduced strike utility. Russia's maritime power continues to compress. Ukraine doesn't need to destroy every Russian naval asset. It needs to make the cost of operating those assets effectively higher than Russia can sustain. That's the strategic logic of the drone campaign, and the Southern Patrol Strike was a precise expression of it. The vessel that replaced the Corvette in the patrol sector. A different Buyan-M unit repositioned from a secondary anchorage, arrived with additional escort elements. Russian command had doubled the patrol boat coverage, added a second helicopter overwatch layer, and adjusted patrol patterns to reduce the predictability Ukrainian intelligence had exploited. Ukrainian planners noted all of these changes. They began building the next pattern of life assessment. The game doesn't end. It evolves. The broader implications of the Southern Patrol Strike extend well beyond this conflict, and this is where Conflict East brings a perspective you won't find in standard military reporting. Several navies had been watching Ukrainian sea drone operations for months before this strike, and the analytical output from their defense establishments reflected genuine uncertainty about how to respond to the threat. The specific challenge the Southern Patrol Strike crystallized. Conventional naval escort doctrine is designed around specific threat models: submarines, aircraft, anti-ship missiles, conventional surface combatants. The doctrine for defeating those threats has been refined over decades, and the sensor weapon systems implementing it are optimized for those specific targets. Autonomous surface vehicles are none of those things. They're slow enough that they can't outrun a patrol boat. They're small enough to evade many sensor systems. They're cheap enough to deploy in numbers that exhaust the engagement capacity of conventional defensive systems. And they're sophisticated enough, given the software and sensor packages Ukraine has been developing, to conduct coordinated multi-axis attacks against targets defended by systems built for a different threat model entirely. The Southern Patrol Strike proved that even a defensive screen specifically designed to stop this threat, using assets that had studied previous drone operations and modified their protocols accordingly, was insufficient against a sufficiently sophisticated attack design. That finding has implications for choke points worldwide. The Strait of Hormuz, the South China Sea littoral zones, the straits around Taiwan, the narrow waters of the Baltic, anywhere that surface patrol vessels protect higher value assets or control maritime corridors. Ukraine built this capability without a formal navy, without a naval academy, without decades of institutional doctrine. They built it through operational iteration, technical innovation, and a willingness to learn from every mission, successful or aborted. The result is a naval drone capability that has outpaced the defensive evolution of an adversary that had studied the threat and specifically invested in countering it. That is the most important lesson of the Southern Patrol Strike. Now let's answer the quiz from earlier. How many patrol vessels did the Ukrainian drone swarm force into simultaneous response? The answer is C, all 4 Raptors simultaneously. Here's why that matters more than it might seem. The revised 3-phase attack geometry, developed in response to the unexpected 4th patrol boat, didn't just work around the problem. It turned the 4th Raptor into an active liability for the Russian defense. When the 3-phase approach played out, the 4th Raptor was forced to respond to the second drone wave, pulling it away from the southern perimeter loop it had been running. That repositioning created a gap actually larger than the gap that would have existed in the original 2-boat perimeter geometry. The unexpected complication, the asset that nearly caused the mission to be scrubbed, became the mechanism that made the penetration cleaner. The tactical adaptation didn't just solve the problem. It used the problem as a weapon. The answer to the earlier comparison question, which capability was deadliest, is also clearer now. The warheads and the navigation system are interchangeable components. The intelligence architecture and the tactical adaptation capability are the differentiating factors. Any nation can buy an autonomous surface vehicle. The capability to build a comprehensive target picture over weeks of observation, redesign and approach geometry under time pressure, and maintain operational security to execute all of that without Russian early warning. That's the capability that wins. Was the decision to conduct the strike during the narrowest patrol coverage window the right call, given that the window was also when shore-based response capacity was at its highest alert from the holiday alert cycle? There's a genuine argument that a wider window, even with more patrol boats present, might have created more confusion in the Russian command response. Could the Russian patrol boat commanders have prevented this penetration with clearer multi-axis response protocols before the attack? The tactical analysis suggests yes. If the four Raptors had operated as a coordinated unit rather than responding sequentially to each new threat vector, the coverage geometry would have been harder to thread. The failure was partly doctrinal, not just numerical. What would you have done differently in the drone approach geometry? If you were the Ukrainian planner looking at that fourth Raptor on the satellite image 48 hours before launch, will Russia develop a genuinely effective counter-drone patrol doctrine for its remaining Black Sea assets, or will the pattern of incremental adaptation continue to lag behind Ukrainian tactical evolution? Comment YES if you think Russia closes the gap, NO if you think Ukrainian innovation stays ahead. Subscribe to Conflict East, because we break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. The patrol zone is quiet now. The Corvette's hull rests on the bottom in roughly 18 meters of water, visible in sonar imagery as an angular shape against the flat seabed, a 950-ton monument to the gap between doctrine and reality. The Raptor boats still run their patrol loops overhead. The radar nets still sweep. The shore stations still track surface contacts. But the calculus has changed. Every Russian naval commander in that zone knows that a defensive screen specifically designed to stop this exact threat failed to stop it. Every Ukrainian drone operator who studies this operation knows that the approach geometry worked. Every naval planner in every country that operates surface combatants in contested littoral waters has read the assessment. The Black Sea is quiet now, but the next iteration is already in development. Somewhere in a Ukrainian control room, operators are running simulations on the next approach geometry, building the next pattern of life assessment, filing the lessons from the last operation into the design of the next one. Modern warfare doesn't forgive tactical rigidity. The Southern Patrol strike proved it. Silent, cold, 18 meters down.